Welcome to another episode of the Whiskey Laymen. I'm Mac, he's Matt, and I got a question. Why are so many scotches Glen something or other?
That's a great question. I've been wondering that since we started drinking whiskey, and you and I have recently found out the answer. Glen is another word for a valley.
Huh.
Yeah.
All this time I was thinking it was like a harbor.
I was thinking it was like a guy named Glen, and I just thought like everyone who made whiskey was, or anyone who made scotch, sorry, was named Glen. I was wrong though.
So it's a valley.
Yes.
So all these come from different valleys?
Well, it's complicated when it comes to that, as we found out. So, the word Glen does mean valley, but it seems like it's become more of a naming tradition more than anything else.
Okay.
For example, there is Glenlivet.
Yes.
Very popular brand of scotch. Glenlivet does come from a place called Glenlivet. That's the name of the valley.
Okay, so it makes sense.
Yes, it makes perfect sense. Glen Moray does not actually come from a valley called Glen Moray, but it, I believe, is the Moray region or area. So so
it's still geographical.
It's still geographical.
That makes a little bit of sense, I guess.
We have Glen Moray here in front of you, so it still makes sense. It comes from a valley in the Moray region.
Okay.
Which I think is a subset of the Speyside region of Scotland.
Gotcha.
Which, incidentally, a lot of our favorite scotches have come from. But Glenmorangie is just an adjective, and I forgot what it meant since we...
Tranquility.
Tranquility, yes.
It means tranquility.
Glenmorangie means tranquility.
Valley of Tranquility.
The Valley of Tranquility.
But there is not actually a Valley of Tranquility.
As far as we can find, there's not actually a place called Glenmorangie in Scotland.
There was a Morangie forest?
I think we saw there was a Morangie forest.
And it's near that.
Maybe.
So it's a mythical valley near the forest of tranquility.
Right.
It's similar to how a lot of American whiskeys have the names of just the person who created them, right? Like, you got your Jim Beam, your Jack Daniels, that sort of thing.
Right, and we even see that in some scotches, like Johnny Walker.
Oh, right, yes, you're right.
Yep.
So, talk to me, we have one more Glen here, don't we?
Yes.
Glen Grant.
Glen Grant. Now, as we learned, there's no valley in Scotland called Glen Grant. That was
right.
It was a family name.
It was a family name.
Yes. Specifically, I believe, two brothers who founded the Glen Grant distillery. So,
but they weren't necessarily even from a specific area.
Not necessarily from a Glen. I mean,
okay.
Maybe they were from a Glen, but it wasn't called Grant.
Gotcha.
That was their last name.
So Glen is kind of a more traditional term than it is an actual idea here. Like, it's not all geography based. These are not all from a valley of something or other.
That's what I think we've gathered here. That's what the conclusion we've come to, is that it's a really popular term to use in scotches, but it doesn't necessarily mean anything specific. It can be something specific, but it can also just be a broad term.
I'm disappointed in this answer.
I kind of am too. What I want to know is, can we call Hidden Valley ranch dressing Hidden Glen ranch dressing from now on?
I'd be okay with this.
Okay. But while we have Glen Moray here, why don't we crack it open and give it a little try. So, we mentioned we had tried the Glenmorangie cake.
Right.
And I think, did we also try the original Glenmorangie in a video where we did a comparison of things? I can't remember.
That might have been the one that we used to try the 3 different value points.
Yes.
And we could tell the difference. We couldn't necessarily tell which one was which, because we didn't know beforehand which ones were which.
Right.
But we could tell which ones were more expensive.
That's fair.
Obviously because they came from a valley.
Well, that's another thing, yeah. Not all scotches come from valleys. We've established that. We mentioned Johnny Walker. But then there are still a lot of scotches named after geographic locations. We talked about Lagavulin, which we haven't tried, but is Nick Offerman, who plays Ron Swanson on Parks and Rec. That's his
go-to?
That's his go-to scotch. And we know that there's actually a Nick Offerman special edition of the Lagavulin scotch And Lagavulin is a town in Scotland in the Isla region.
Mm-hmm.
So still with the geographical names. And another Scotch that we tried recently was the Aberlour, which is another town in the Speyside region. And then there's the term Speyside itself, which this Glen Moray is a variety of, Speyside Scotch. And Spey is a river. Yes, it's a river in Scotland. So the Speyside region in Scotland is just anything near the River Spey.
Right. But didn't we determine that Glen Moray is actually on a different river altogether?
Yes, because so it's important to note on the bottle it says Elgin Classic, right? I'm assuming we're pronouncing that incorrectly. Maybe it's Elgin.
Well, I'm getting a very, very flowery bouquet.
Oh, okay.
I'm getting a whole bunch of like flower off the flavor.
You know, I kind of like this.
Yeah, it's different.
I had never heard of Glen Moray prior to seeing this bottle in the store.
Okay.
I had heard of Glenlivet, Glenfiddich, which we don't have, unfortunately, but that's another Glen Scotch I've heard of. And Glenmorangie was the first Scotch I ever had that a friend bought for me. Never heard of Glen Moray, though. But it seems like this might be a decent Scotch, just based on your first taste. Would you agree?
Yeah, it's to use a non-flavor term, as we know, this is a very, very common thing to do. This has got a happy flavor, a bright flavor.
I am detecting notes of smokiness in this. Do you agree?
Faintly?
Okay.
Like fainter than Johnny Walker's.
Right.
But a little bit.
Right.
Ooh, what was the term I used before? It was like the memory of last night's campfire, maybe?
Yeah, the memory of a bonfire, I believe, is what the actual words were.
This reminds me much, much more of the bonfires of the holiday season in the summer.
Yeah, this is, I from what I understand, and I could be wrong about this, Speyside whiskeys are a subset of, or Speyside scotches, I'm going to use the correct term here, are a subset of Highland malt scotches.
Okay.
Which is overall a type and geographical region, because again, in Scotland, I think type of whiskey and geography are very closely linked.
I would agree with that.
But Speyside and Highland malts in general tend to be the less smoky of the scotches. So I was a little surprised to notice a little bit of smokiness in this.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's not very prominent. This is not a Lafroig here.
It's no Lafroig.
No.
Thank God for that.
I'm getting a bunch of citrus or spring flower time type like smells and flavors though.
I see what you mean. It's got a lot of very like crisp, almost sharp flavors to it that really kind of grab my attention. As soon as I take a sip, I'm kind of like my senses are awakened when I sip it. It's like, wow, that's a lot of flavor.
But it's not necessarily like the sugary burst you get from a bourbon.
Right. No.
Not that oaky, sugary.
Right. Yeah. Vanilla. There's none of like the oaky, woody aftertaste.
Do you get any vanilla at all?
I don't know. Definitely a little bit in the smell, but I don't know if I notice it in the taste as much.
Okay.
Because I think that was the thing we've talked about in several other videos now, is that the bourbons, one of the biggest notes we notice through all the bourbons is the vanilla taste.
Absolutely.
And I think in scotches, that's kind of been more of a mixed bag.
Yes.
It's often overwhelmed by fruit or other flavors.
Now, drinking this scotch, do you think you have the answer to why so many scotches are Glen something or other?
Well, no. It does taste like a scotch. I will say that.
I mean, in a general sense, a lot of scotches have some similar notes to them.
Sure.
But I do think, maybe the majority of the Glens we've tried are all Speyside, though.
I think that's true. I think actually the majority of the scotches we've tried have been Speysides or Highland malts.
So maybe that's why we have the commonality, not necessarily the Glen name.
That could be. That's true. I'm going to give this 7. I like it.
7.25. Got to keep those numbers nice and round.
Got to keep more than one decimal point, as always. Yep. Would you recommend this to beginner?
Yeah. I think it's you're not necessarily picking up a whole bunch of those intricate notes, but it is a very appealing flavor.
Yeah.
So I'd definitely serve this to somebody who had never drinking whiskey before.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with that. It's a 40% alcohol, so there's not too much of a deathly burn there. I don't think it would turn people off who, don't normally drink liquor straight.
Yeah.
So I think I agree. Well, there you have it. No conclusive answers on what Glen really is and why so many Scotches have it, because it seems like they're kind of just making it up as they go.
Cheers to more Glen.
Cheers to Glen.